Dr. Alan Rubin.
Hi,
Welcome
Scott.
to Diabetes Health.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
I just found out about your series of healthcasts. And
Right.
I just got to hear the first one on a plane ride out to these American Diabetes Association meetings. I thought maybe you could go over the one on longevity.
All right, well, let me tell you what these healthcasts are, because a lot of people don't know what podcasts and healthcasts are. Basically, they are recorded discussions, just like you can record a photograph and put it on the internet. You can record a talk or a speech or anything like that and put that on the internet. And with the help of my son, who is a webmaster in San Francisco, I've been able to create about 40 or more of these healthcasts now. We started doing it last May 2005, and we've been doing it every week since then. We have talked about all kinds of topics, and the very first one we talked about was what are the ways that you can take care of your health so that not only are you alive when you reach the age of 70 and 80, but you're really in excellent health. There was a guy at Harvard who started these studies. It was begun actually with Harvard students, and then they realized they only had men in the study. They decided maybe they should have women in the study, and they realized then that they only had middle class or more wealthy people, so they added a group of poorly educated lower class people into this study for over 70 or 80 years. And what were the 7 things they found that would ensure not just longevity but good health in old age? First of all, they found that you should not smoke. Any smoking was going to be very damaging, and in fact, it's been shown that you lose an average of 10 years of your life if you're a cigarette smoker. Secondly, they found...
Let me stop there, because on your podcast it says stop smoking at age 45. Does that assume someone maybe picked it up when they were a teenager?
Most
that you
people
can actually smoke for 30 years without and recover from that damage?
If you stop at 45, it's been shown that if you stay off the cigarettes, you can recover from the damage, right? But after 45, the damage becomes irreversible.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can possibly, if you've been a smoker, it doesn't mean you're doomed for life. Stop by 45, you can still be okay.
But it seems like the other message people might take is, oh, I can smoke while I'm young, and then when I quit, my body's going to completely regenerate.
Well, I wouldn't want them to take away that message,
Yeah.
because certainly smoking still causes sudden death even under the age of 45. Smoking ruins your sense of taste.
Throat cancer.
It certainly causes cancer.
Peter Jennings, that was so sad.
Right,
Lung cancer.
Peter Jennings had lung cancer and died of lung cancer. Lots of stories like that. So, no, I wouldn't encourage anybody to smoke until 45 and then stop. I would hope that people will never take up that terrible habit.
Right. But quit by 45 if you are a smoker.
But at least if you quit by 45, there's a chance that you can reverse the stuff that's already happened to you. Right?
Okay.
And then a second important thing that you can do is to make sure that you maintain a fairly normal weight throughout your life. So obviously, diet is included in that. You have to eat a fairly decent diet in order to do that. The third thing has to do with alcohol. If you take in excessive alcohol, that not only can affect you physically, but it affects you psychologically. And alcohol can cause you either to die young or to have a pretty miserable older age. So don't drink, or if you do drink, limit yourself, if you're a male, to 1 drink, maximum 2 a night of wine, 1 or 2 glasses of wine, maximum 10 a week. If you're a female, 1 a night, maximum 5 a week. That's the recommendation. If you're taking in more than that, you're drinking too much. And don't forget that alcohol has calories, so that's another source of extra problem for you. Okay, so then a fourth important factor is exercise. You want to continue exercising throughout your life. A fifth factor had to do with being able to turn lemons into lemonade, being able to deal with life stresses and not get overwhelmed by them. A sixth factor had to do with your age, rather your amount of education. The people who were better educated seemed to live longer and better, maybe because they knew what they had to do. They knew how to take care of themselves, but they did better. And finally, a stable marriage is actually a very important aspect of living longer. And some of the things that you might be surprised didn't matter that much in determining how long you live were the age of your parents, for example. Another thing that didn't matter that much was how you grew up, whether you grew up in an extremely stressful environment or not so stressful environment. That didn't affect how long you would live. And your serum cholesterol at 50 did not determine whether you were going to die of a heart attack before the age of 70. So there's a very interesting study by these Harvard doctors, and I certainly recommend it. And of course, I should say something about my books because I'm the author of Diabetes for Dummies.
Let me just stop. There's not any mention of diet in that list. You had the one about maintaining the proper weight. Was
Right.
there a sense whether these people were vegetarians, big meat eaters,
It
lots of
didn't
fiber?
It didn't seem to make that much difference how they maintained their weight, but maintaining the weight, not being obese, not being overweight was very important.
I'm sure you hear that a lot from your patients with diabetes. What should I eat?
Yeah, certainly that's a big problem. What I try to tell them, they come to me, very many of them come to me and they say, "Oh, I can't touch sugar." And I say to them, you can use some sugar. You don't have to live your life with artificial sweeteners, but use it in moderation. If you enjoy a little sugar in your coffee, that's okay. And they say, I guess I should never be eating fat. And fat is a necessary part of a diet, but there are good fats and there are bad fats. The saturated fats and certainly the trans fats you don't want to eat. You want to eat the monounsaturated fats that can actually be good for you and lower your cholesterol. So what you eat is important.
Okay.
And I wanted to say, just mentioning my books, I've written Diabetes for Dummies, and it's now in a second edition, and Diabetes Cookbook for Dummies, and my effort in those books was, number one, to teach people in a way that they could understand. So I tried to make the books as comprehensible as possible. And number two, to add a little humor to the situation, because we tend to get a little gloomy about diabetes. We hear these days that diabetes causes your kidneys to fail, causes you to become blind, causes you to lose your legs and have amputations. Well, it doesn't have to happen. You can take care of yourself properly and never have any of those complications. That is the absolute most important idea that I hope to get people to understand in my books. And I've gotten a lot of great feedback. There was a young fellow, in fact, a new patient in my office just this week, who told me that he developed diabetes when he was teaching English to Japanese in Japan. And the doctors in Japan didn't speak much English. He didn't speak Japanese at that time. And his mother came over. The first thing she gave him when she arrived from the United States was my book, Diabetes for Dummies. And he told me that really made him hopeful, made him feel that he could do this thing, that he could get through it, that it wasn't a death sentence for him. That makes me feel very, very good. And the same thing with the podcast, which I like to call healthcasts. I got a letter, curiously enough, from a man in Japan this past week who also is teaching, but in this case he's teaching English to doctors in Japan. And the doctors are listening to my healthcasts every morning in order to understand the terminology, in order to know how to speak English and medical English correctly. So all of this is very, very gratifying, and a lot of that stuff is going on and I don't even know about it. It's fun to find out.
Dr. Rubin, congratulations on the success of your books and your podcast. I wanted to ask you, I know the good endocrinologists don't wait for the research studies to prove something. They're years ahead often, like the DCCT came out in 1993, but many, many good doctors were practicing tight control before that. So what's now? What's going to be proven that the good doctors are already
Well, I think that
taking advantage of?
A lot of good doctors are using Byetta, for example, in type 2 diabetes. I'm using a lot of it myself. I'm finding it very, very helpful and effective for patients.
Blood sugar control and weight loss?
Weight loss and blood sugar control both lowers the hemoglobin A1C, and the patients are feeling psychologically better. They seem to have a better quality of life, which is very, very important. There's a lot of depression around diabetes, and sometimes when they see that success, the depression tends to lift a little bit.
So yeah, you're getting two birds with one stone with
right.
That. So
exactly.
with you have someone with type 2 that comes in, what's your first medicine you put them on?
Well, what I like to do before I put anybody on medicine is see if lifestyle changes are going to make a difference. I think it's so very important to emphasize lifestyle as the number one key thing. In fact, I get new patients who have been out of control on several medicines. I'll often start to take their medicines away because they're not doing anything anyway, and get them to start walking a day, 30 minutes a day. You know, it's been shown in a recent study, you take 100 people who are absolutely destined to have type 2 diabetes because both of their parents had type 2 diabetes, and you ask them to just walk 30 minutes a day, 70% of them will not get diabetes. And that's a tremendously important thing. It makes a huge difference. And not to mention, you know, even the people who already have diabetes and you get them to walk, exercise, you get them to eat more properly, lose a little bit of weight, you can lower, even if you lower the hemoglobin A1C from 8 to 7.5, you're not at 7, the ADA goal, but you have reduced their chance of complications by 50% or more. So you're accomplishing something. So lifestyle is always my first objective.
And then, well, when do you add the metformin, the Byetta, the insulin?
Okay, if I see that they are truly making an effort to do the lifestyle changes and that is not succeeding in controlling their blood sugar, then I start with metformin usually. I'll start with metformin, maybe 500 milligrams twice a day, to make sure that they're not going to get side effects from the metformin. Then I'll build it up to maybe 1,000 twice a day, even 3 times a day sometimes. After that, if necessary, I'll add one of the glitazone drugs, Actos or Avandia, one or the other. And of course, you've got to give that time. You've got to give all of these things time.
And some of those promote weight gain.
That's right. The glitazones absolutely do promote weight gain. The nice thing about metformin and why I use it first is because usually there's little weight loss.
Yeah.
But with the glitazones, there'll be some weight gain, and so I use them second. I don't like to use the sulfonylureas generally. Sure, you can get big drops in blood sugar temporarily, but I found that most patients eventually fail on sulfonylureas, and I believe that they have some heart problems associated with them. Mm-hmm. So I don't like to use sulfonylureas. So after I've used metformin, I've used the glitazones, then particularly if the patient is still overweight, I might add Byetta as an injection. And even though it is an injection, it's easily taken, it's 2 shots a day, and patients, when they do well, are very willing to take it.
So, do you take away the glitazone at that point?
Usually I'll keep the drugs going, and as I see improvement, then I'll start to pull back on the glitazone first, and then even the metformin if possible. Mm-hmm. Sure.
And how about insulin?
Okay, when all else fails, you know, when you
try Byetta first and then
try
insulin.
Byetta first, and you still have the high blood sugars, then I might go on to insulin, mm-hmm. right? I like to do Lantus. I start with so-called 24-hour insulin, although in my practice I don't find it to be 24 hours. I find that you really often need 2 shots of Lantus, even though mm-hmm. they advertise it as being 24 hours. So I give them the maximum Lantus, the big dose of Lantus in the morning, not in the afternoon. It works much better through the day. That's when they need that insulin. Because I was finding when I gave it in the evening, they would wake up with a very, very low blood sugar. If I give it in the morning, the food that they're eating counteracts the insulin they're getting, mm-hmm. and it tends to be smoother. And then if they're still waking up with a little high morning glucose, a few units of Lantus at night takes care of that.
So with your average type 2, is it like 12 units, and do you see a place you start?
Very variable. I start at a pretty low dose because they're hypersensitive to insulin. I might even start with 5 units depending on the age of the patient, mm-hmm. but 10 units is a reasonable place to begin.
10 in the morning and then?
10 in the morning, and then, if necessary, 3-4 units mm-hmm. at night to take mm-hmm. care of the morning blood glucose. Mm-hmm. And then, if necessary, if we still have a problem, then I'll use preprandial short-acting insulin, mm-hmm. Novolog, Humalog, one of those.
And then eventually the inhalable insulin?
Yeah, right. Of course, inhalable insulin is only going to be available on the market in July, so we haven't been able to use that in our offices yet. But as soon as it's available, I have a bunch of candidates that I'm certainly going to try it on. I want to say one thing that's very, very important. I never make changes if things are going well. Just because there's a new good product on the market doesn't mean you throw away what's working and try something that you don't know about. If my patients are under control, I'm not going to switch them to inhaled insulin. If they're doing well on shots, most patients, if they're doing well on shots, it means they're taking their shots and they don't mind taking them. They're doing okay. I've had patients say to me, I don't see any reason to go to inhaled insulin. I'm doing just fine with my shots. So I'll keep them on that. But the patients who aren't doing as well, maybe it's because they're not taking the shots because they don't like the idea of shots. They will try inhaled insulin. So I'm definitely going to be using that as soon as it's available.
So what's next for your healthcast?
Well, I have all kinds of ideas about what I'm going to do next. You know, I like to keep up with the issues in medicine that are occurring. I mean, I had a couple of healthcasts on influenza when there was the big scare about bird flu, which maybe is not as big a deal as it was first thought to be. I had a healthcast about Katrina after the big hurricane and all the medical consequences of Hurricane Katrina. So I like to go with what's new and current. And of course my specialty is diabetes and thyroid disease, so I talk a lot about thyroid and diabetic advances and problems in those areas. So, you know, as time goes by, I'll see what the new issues are and I'll try to add them to my healthcast. But I'm certainly going to have one a week, and if you want to listen to them, you go to my website. My website is www.drrubin.com. It's drrubin.com. And not only will you find the healthcast there, but you'll find a lot of information that I've written about diabetes, about thyroid disease, about high blood pressure, and you'll find links to the very best sources on the internet for all of those problems. So you go to my website, click on diabetes addresses, and that'll take you to another page which has all the very best addresses on the web for diabetes problems, starting with the American Diabetes Association.
That's terrific. Dr. Rubin, thank you for all you're doing for people with diabetes.
Well, it's been my pleasure. It's a labor of love, Scott.